This conference
Press
will now
record.
be recorded.
Excellent. Well, hello and welcome everyone to this introductory seminar on the DIGICORE MEDOC-ETL training. So I am James Anderson. I know some of you, but not all of you. I work with DIGICORE. I'm a leadership development advisor, and I help run, plan and administer a number of the different training programs that we're involved with. So it's very nice to meet you. We're going to be hearing from a couple of other folk as well today. So my colleague Will, who works closely with me in DIGICORE, and then I think we're going to be hearing from James and Manan from the IQVIA OMOP team, who will be telling us a little bit more later on in the call. So that they'll be also part of a larger team that is helping to deliver this training. Now, I don't think everyone knows everyone else on the call. I'd be very surprised if you did. So I just encourage you as we get going just to say hello in the chat and maybe say where you're from, which organisation, and anything about your role if there's a particular specialism that you have. So it'd be great just as we get going with the call if you could say hello in the chat, and we'll have a better idea of all the different organisations and functions represented here today. So that's who we are, and let me explain a little bit about what the objectives of today's call are. So firstly, just a little bit of an introduction, so you can get to meet us and we get to meet each other. We're going to tell you about DIGICORE, about Digi1i3, and how that relates to the funding of the programme that we're working on, and about OMOP as well. Now, I think almost everyone on the call will be aware of DIGICORE to some extent. Many of you are members. Some of you are very intimately involved with some of the work that we're doing already around the pilot. I think a lot of you will know a fair deal about OMOP as well, but there'll just be a chance to kind of refresh your understanding of that. Then we're going to talk to you about the MEDOC-ETL training program. So we'll say more about that, but that is about giving you the skills to actually build, maintain, and improve an OMOP instance in your own centre to support oncology research, and that will be quite a big part of what we're talking about today. And then at the end, hopefully, you will have a clear idea of what the programme is, what's involved, and whether it's appropriate for you. And if you want to enrol, we will give you we'll tell you about how to do that. So that's broadly what we're looking to do today. And as I say, the kind of objective is by the end, you should have a clear enough view about what this is, about whether this is right for you, and whether to sign up or whether you need to maybe speak to some colleagues and invite them along as well. Fantastic. Okay, so the first bit then is just to tell you or remind you a little bit about DIGICORE, and indeed this specific bit that we're working on, Digi1i3. So most of you know DIGICORE is effectively a public-private partnership. It's what's called technically it's an independent European economic interest group, and it brings together a fairly large number of cancer centres from across Europe. I'll show you those on a map in a minute, but we've got over 40, I think, involved in the partnership, but also involvement from some of the larger collectives like Alliance Against Cancer, and also the private sector as well, including IQVIA. A number of folks are on the call today from IQVIA. It is a pan-EU research collaboration aiming to study cancer outcomes, and particularly looking to the opportunities there in outcomes research around digitisation, around really kind of developing large cohorts of patients to allow us to study precision oncology across the continent. Lots of benefits, obviously, for the participants, for patients, also with a view over time to being able to increasingly partner with commercial organisations as well to support their research agendas. And DIGICORE, since its inception a number of years ago, has been doing various different things. It exists to firstly just kind of promote and bring people together in networks. It has already conducted a number of training programs that some of you may be familiar with. So this is the training program we're talking about today. In a sense, follows on and builds on our experience of running training programs before. DIGICORE applies to different grants. It's one of the big things it does is grant applications. And it also conducts research. And again, looking at the list of names who are here, many of you will know this and will have lived and breathed some of this, for example, through the DigiOne pilot that we've had, and folks like Prabhash will remember the study-a-thon that we ran just a few weeks ago. So it's a well-established organisation, DIGICORE, looking to improve cancer outcomes research. Now, here are the list of all the different participating hospitals. I hope we've got everyone on there. If we haven't, and your organisation should be there and it isn't, my sincere apologies. It's been growing fast. I sometimes struggle to make sure I've got the right slide in the deck. But as it says here, we've got 40 cancer centres from 18 countries and continuing to look to welcome new people into DIGICORE, into the network. So that's kind of a bit of context. One of the things that DIGICORE has done recently is to be successful in winning a very substantial European grant, what we're calling the DigiOne-i3 consortium, so 12 million euros. And fundamentally, that money is to actually continue to build the infrastructure to enable some of this cancer outcomes research, precision research, digital research. And as you'll see on the page here, we've got a significant number of hospitals, cancer treatment centres involved. We've got DIGICORE itself as a coordinator. We've got private sector partners as well. A range of different organisations that are coming together to deliver this objective, which is, as you see at the top right, to create a federated, privacy-managed, high-quality digital research network built on open standards that links routine clinical data with the routine molecular data at leading cancer centres across Europe. And that was something that we launched just towards the end of last year. And again, many of the sites, in fact, almost all of the sites on this page here are going to be represented on this programme. It is actually very much designed around the needs of this I3 programme in order to be able to give people the skills that they need to develop and use the cancer OMOP instances in their sites. So it determines very much then our focus and our funding of what we're going to be looking at, what the purposes of the programs are. It is to help you and your institution develop and improve an OMOP instance to enable future cancer research. And the other thing is it's about OMOP. It's about that specific kind of format for cancer data that is going to be absolutely critical to underpinning this collaboration across multiple sites. So with that in mind, I'm going to invite my colleague James to tell you a little bit more about that. Again, I know many of you will know a lot about this already, but for those of you who don't, or whose knowledge is a little bit rusty, this is just a chance to get you up to speed on what OMOP is and why it's so useful and important. So James, over to you.
Thank you very much, James. So as we start talking about this research network of oncology hospitals through Europe, we have to start thinking about some of the practicalities of actually running research studies across it. So if we have hospitals with their data in their own format, in their own vocabularies, and might be commonly used vocabularies or just local vocabularies, we hit a problem with a network study. So the classic approach to this is that we'd have to build analytical packages for each individual hospital. And accompanying that, you'd have to have your own SAP and protocol aligned with that too. Now that's simply just not scalable, and it's an expensive process, it's time consuming, and we would also argue that it reduces the robustness somewhat as well, because if you scale up to a 35 hospital network and you have to build 35 analytical packages, compare those and make sure that they're all doing the same thing, you just increase your room for error. So what we need is data standardization. The idea that if we can put healthcare data into the same structure using the same vocabularies, then actually all we need to do is write one analytical package which we can then share across the whole network. We'd argue that that, first of all, obviously makes the process more cost effective and quicker, but it also makes it more robust because you've only got one analytical package that you have to review. The other advantage of this is to do with patient privacy. So if I can anticipate what a database looks like without ever seeing it, I'm still able to actually build out an analytical package. I can then share that with my collaborators who can execute the package behind their firewall and share just aggregated statistics summary data with me. Could you go to the next slide, please, James?
Sure. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. So this is where OMOP comes in, and OMOP is all about standardization, and I often talk about these 4 pillars of OMOP, if you will. The first is the standardized common data model, which you can see at the bottom left. This is a table structure by which healthcare data should be stored in and is consistent between all OMOP versions. You then have the standardized coding system. This is essentially a vocabulary, an OMOP vocabulary, which allows source data to be mapped to the same code, meaning the same thing. So if you took, for instance, a diagnosis of prostate cancer, that might be represented by different codes in ICD, SNOMED, local vocabularies, or even as text. The idea with the standardized coding system is that by the time it reaches OMOP, all of those records will be represented by the same single code. And because we have a standardized common data model and the standardized coding system, from that we can build standardized tools, both data quality tools to help us assess how the quality of our OMOPing and also any issues with our data, and also standardized analytical tools to generate some of the real world insights that we're interested in, such as cohort characterization, treatment pathways, comparative effectiveness, all the way up to frontline patient prediction tools have been built. Next slide, please. So OMOP has been around now for well over a decade, and essentially it works. And this slide here is just trying to give an idea of some of the significant publications that have come from our team here at IQVIA who have been using OMOP for this time. You can see that we've published across a range of therapeutic areas, including oncology, in some high impact journals shown in the middle, and also using a range of analytical categories, as you can see up in the top right. And one key factor you see here, not only does it work for us, but it works for other organizations as well. So at the bottom, you see some of our collaborators, Odyssey being the international OMOP user community. You've also got Eden there, the European network trying to utilize healthcare data, Pioneer, Prostate Cancer Network, and so forth. So OMOP works. It works for us and it works for other research partners as well. Next slide, please, James.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge that we have on this network is that we have to OMOP a very specific set of data. And this is called MEDOC, or the Minimum Essential Description of Cancer. This is a collection of concepts which has been refined to as high priority requirements for oncology care quality and outcome studies. So there's been a consensus between clinicians. A lot of work has gone into this, that these are concepts that are needed for meaningful oncology research. But they're also concepts that can practically be captured and structured in hospital data as well. So what part of this training is, the purpose of this training is that we can teach sites how to take these concepts, which are essential for oncology research, and land those in the appropriate places in the OMOP common data model, thereby allowing us to run these digital network studies of oncology. And with that, I will pass over to, I think, is it back to you, James?
It's back to me, yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, James. So the story so far today, we've got a network, which is DIGICORE. We've got some funding, which we've got from the European Union with the I3 bid. We've now got some data standards and a vocabulary with OMOP and MEDOC, but that is not in and of itself going to be sufficient to get us to the outcomes that we want and actually to be able to produce the high quality research. And of course, the missing piece of the jigsaw is making sure that we've got the people with the right skills and experience. Our view is, and this is borne out through our interactions through the bid process and recently, is that while there are some already people out there, a good number of people with the right skills and experience to build, construct, maintain OMOP databases, that knowledge is not widely enough shared across the network. So they exist, but they don't. Those people exist, but they don't exist in sufficient numbers just yet. I think there's some other things that we need to bear in mind as well, is not just the skills, but actually being able to demonstrate that we can put them into practice. So we're actually are able to develop some study outputs that we can take to grant makers and commercial partners. And I think as we look to the future, we want not just people who are proficient in these skills in OMOP, but actually increasingly able to take on a leadership role in the kind of building of the community and the dissemination of the skills and techniques. And that will be an important determinant of future success. So we need the skills as well as the data model and the technology. And in response to this, and as part of this I3 bid, DIGICORE is actually running 2 training programs. We're here to talk about the one on the left, which is the MEDOC-ETL training. We'll go into this in quite a bit more detail, but as I hope you've realized by now, it's aimed at IT staff, data scientists, the people whose job it is to kind of configure the data into the correct standards so that we can run these standardized network studies. That's what we're talking about today. It's a big part and a critical enabler of getting to the results we want. There is another program some of you may be aware of, and just so at least you know that it's there, that is called Ideal for OMOP, and that is stands for the IQVIA DIGICORE Early Career Leadership Program for OMOP. And that is aimed at the more at the researchers, whether it be clinical researchers or perhaps some of the statisticians, research interested data scientists, research managers. And that, if the one on the left is about building the data repositories and getting things in the right place, the one on the right is more about leading, conducting, planning, and executing international studies using that new infrastructure that we're building. So good for you to know about Ideal for OMOP. Some of you may know people who are going on that. It's good for you to know that it exists, but we're going to be very much focused on the left-hand side today and the MEDOC-ETL training. So what is it? Just at a high level, and I'm going to hand on to Manan in a minute, who'll talk it through in a bit more detail, but this is, who's this for? Well, we think it's going to be about 30 people in total, and we've got 35 people on the call today, and I know there's some people who can't make it, so this is kind of the size of the cohort that we're aiming at. Broadly speaking, we think it'll be largely about hospital IT staff and data scientists, or that it could be, clinicians with a real interest in building these kinds of databases. We don't think that specific coding, we've designed it so that specific coding skills are not needed. They might be useful, but actually a lot of this, as we'll explain, can be done in Excel. So don't need a particularly strong or a particular technical background. We're going to be talking about training the basics of OMOP and MEDOC, and very much with a view to supporting you as you build a cancer OMOP instance in your own hospital or your own site. So there'll be lots of exercises and practice and homework on some data that we'll provide, but hopefully that will enable you to build that in your own hospital. Again, more detail in a minute, but it's going to be a mix of virtual seminars and in-person training with a bit of expert support. And the timescale is really, we're going to be starting in the next few months. There's going to go through to July, will be the seminars and the training, and then perhaps some lighter touch support later in the year. I think one thing just is probably important to be clear about is who's eligible for this. And in terms of the virtual training, this is something we're happy to make available to everyone. So everyone and anyone really can join that and learn about and do the homework exercises and practice on the data. We are limited for the face-to-face component. and that's largely due to the funding that we've received from I3. So there's a limited number of places of that, about 30. Priority there will be given to the I3 sites themselves, but we certainly hope a number of other people will be able to come along as well. If you're an I3 site, you'll actually have it all funded as well, so the travel, the accommodation will be paid for. If you're not in the I3 consortium, we'd still hope to get some of you along. You might just need to arrange your own travel and accommodation funding. We'll come back to that in a minute, but broadly speaking, the virtual component of it is we want to make that as widely available as possible. So the idea is that when we come to the end of the talk component in July, we're going to have a cohort of 30 of you trained up, leading implementation in your sites. I know some of you have got OMOP already, some of you that will be new to you, but all of you with new skills and reinforced capabilities to take that work forward. And we also hope that as we go through this, we can continue to build some of the library of useful tools and documentation that we've been working on so far. And as we get to the end of the year, hopefully that will be bearing fruit in terms of actually more hospitals able to contribute to research, more cancer centres able to contribute to the research agenda of the BID and of DIGICORE with these OMOP instances in place. So that's it at a high level. I'm going to hand over to Manon now, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about what the objectives of the programme are and how it's structured.
Thanks, James. So let's talk a little bit more about the objective and how we plan to get there. So overall, we want to make sure that you're enabled to build and maintain your own OMOP CDM instance. But in order to do that, you need to first understand the OMOP data model. So we'll give quite a bit of background on the OMOP data model, the benefits of it, and why you should feel confident that that is the data model you want to use for your research, right? We'll explore a little bit more about the vocabulary. James spoke a little bit about the standardization of codes, the benefits of doing that, and how you can do that with your data. We will convert synthetic source data into the OMOP data model, so you'll get to see a real-world example, or rather how it's done, what it would look like originally, and then what that OMOP version would look like once the conversion is completed. And then finally, we'll do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the oncology extension itself. This is a much more complicated area to work with. As the name suggests, it's an extension of the data model, so it's not fit for everybody's data. But of course, in this case, we're very interested in capturing as much detail as possible about cancer and the related data elements. So we'll spend some time going into that as well. Again, we want to support this with some practical exercises. Hopefully, by the end of it, every site will feel comfortable that they have the information that they need to transform their data into the OMOP common data model. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. All right, so as for what we will be making available, to start, we want to prepare everyone for a face-to-face that we plan on having in July in Frankfurt, Germany. That preparation will involve 2 webinars. Essentially, we'll go into details on what those webinars will include, but our plan right now is to have 2 4-hour webinars, which will take place over the next couple months, which will culminate at Frankfurt with a 3-day face-to-face. Afterwards, we can offer up office hours or touch-ins to essentially assist you guys with any questions that you might have that come up after the webinars and the face-to-face. When you are trying to implement your own OMOP data model, we understand things can get a little confusing. You'll have your own hurdles that you run into, which we may have seen ourselves, or we'll at least have some feedback as to the best approach that we would recommend for those situations. Ultimately, again, the goal is that by the end of the preparations, the face-to-face, and then the follow-up time period afterwards, hopefully towards the end of the year, you'll have your own OMOP instance of your data again, by the end of 2024. So that first webinar, our plan is to have this hopefully sometime in April, or end of April or early May. The plan is to have it for about 4 hours. I will probably be leading the bulk of that training with some support from some of our other folks here at IQVIA. The prerequisites for that are quite minimal. We just expect that you have some basic understanding of databases and tables and how they relate to one another. You do not need to have any SQL experience. The examples that we'll show and even the synthetic data, we will pull into something like an Excel environment, something where you can just see some lines of data. So you don't need to be able to actually have any coding experience or SQL experience to be able to participate in the first 2 webinars. Beyond that, we do expect that you have some knowledge of some clinical terms and medical coding systems. In other words, if you've worked with healthcare data in any capacity, you'll probably be good to go for these webinars. And again, this webinar is open to just about everyone. We expect to be predominantly people who will be working on the ETL to convert their data, but you can have anyone join these webinars. As for the topics that we want to cover in the first webinar, like I mentioned before, we want to do a walkthrough of the OMOP data model, the benefits of using OMOP. We'll go in a little bit deeper with the vocabulary itself, which is the most important aspect of OMOP, and why the OMOP model is so user-friendly for research purposes, especially relative to some other common data models. As for the ETL, we'll go into a little bit about some QA checks that we would recommend, the best ways to perform those QA checks, as well as general ETL pitfalls that we've noticed other clients of ours have run into, things you might want to be aware of when you're creating your code and your ETL. We'll give some examples of data points that you might see in your EMR or your claims data and what those will look like in OMOP, and we'll keep it really simple, right? So we'll just have it in Excel or something like that, and we'll walk you guys through what that would look like in the final product. And then finally, we'll offer up some exercises. This way, everyone has a chance to stop listening and actually test their knowledge. Even at the end, we'll give you guys some assignments, essentially as homework, if you will, that will give you a little bit of a chance to, again, test your knowledge, and hopefully by the second webinar, you'll feel pretty confident that what you've done works. So let's go to the second webinar. So our plan for the second webinar, again, would be a 4-hour training, about a month after the first training, so hopefully sometime in June. The prerequisites are mostly the same. We would expect that you just have some understanding of databases and clinical terminology. Again, you don't need SQL experience, but if you have it, it is beneficial. Most likely this will be led by Chi Yang. Chi Yang is a key contributor to the Oncology Extension Work Group in Odyssey. The topics that we plan to go over in the second webinar to start off, we would want to review some of the assignments and do a quick recap of what we talked about in the first webinar, go over some of the examples that we left you guys with, in that 1 month that hopefully you had a chance to work on. We'll provide a demonstration of the synthetic source data and it being converted over into OMOP, specifically key MEDOC data elements. And we'll also go into more detail on how to capture high-level cancer-related information and how that fits into the OMOP model as well. And then finally, we'll leave you guys with some more exercise as well. And these would relate a little bit more to the examples that we went over on this webinar. Again, those cancer data elements that I think are of more interest for this group. And then finally, that would lead us to the face-to-face, which would happen July 17th through 19th in Frankfurt, Germany. The goal here is to get a little bit more technical. So we'll execute some parts of the data conversions by sharing and running those SQL scripts. So for the face-to-face, it would be helpful if you've had some SQL experience. If you don't, that's probably still okay. You could probably understand what the scripts are doing just by looking at them. We'll keep it kind of basic. Again, I would expect most of the people who are attending the face-to-face probably are the folks who end up or will want to be doing the ETL conversion themselves. So you probably will have some coding or SQL experience. So hopefully that's not a large problem. We'll provide a refresher on the first 2 webinars. We'll go over the assignments that we left you with, particularly the previous one. We'll introduce the OMOP oncology extension, um, things related really on how to link together some low-level events into disease phases, outcomes, treatments. Again, we'll be using the synthetic data, but we can also work with the data that you might be coming with, especially if you've already started to attempt to do the conversion yourself and you've run into some situations. We can look at those examples and try to help you through them. We'll take a deeper look at some of the critical ETL areas like the quality assurance. So I want to touch on that a little bit in the first webinar, but we'll give you a more robust look at what the quality checks are that are part of the OMOP model and what we recommend. Again, we want to build confidence in users, especially the ones conducting the research, so that they feel good about what they're conducting their studies against, right? That we're not losing too much data in the OMOP data model. That the data transformation is done appropriately. So we'll have quality checks in place for that. And then finally, that face-to-face is a good opportunity to ask questions. Any hurdles that you might have been seeing with your own data, we can modify that agenda based on any feedback that we're getting from the webinars themselves. So if you do have any questions, that would be a great place to bring them. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, beyond that, we will have some touch points after the face-to-face where you can continue to ask questions, office hours or something like that. Of course, will be available through email as well. Yeah, and that's the gist of the two webinars and the face-to-face. And I will send it over to Will.
Hi, thanks, Anand. So if we just go on to the next slide. Okay, so a summary then of what this course, two sections, what you get and what you need to commit, if all this sounds right up your street. So what you get, as Manan's just outlined in some detail, 2 immersive webinars from ETL experts, and there will be practical homework to enable you to put into practice all that you're learning. The face-to-face training in Frankfurt has just been discussed, and then follow-up support through that kind of community of those doing MEDOC-ETL, a kind of chat function, an opportunity to be asking questions as you continue. But what you really get is a network from this. So you've got that training input, but actually you'll be working together, and particularly those then on the face-to-face. There's an existing network within the I3 program of sites and others as well that will be joining. So it will help build a network of like-minded professionals, and that element of support as well will be a peer support. Being able to learn from each other will be an important part. And then very practical advice on implementing an OMOP instance in your site. What you need to commit then, we estimate about 2 to 3 total days between end of April when this starts to July, and that will be the webinars and the homework. And then there's the 3 days in-person training in July involving travel to Frankfurt. Other things you need to commit: enthusiasm, working with peers on an international outcome study. As James said right at the outset, there's no particular technical programming skills required here, but we will be you'll see in the registration form, it'd be very helpful to know what skills you already have. We want to pitch this right. We want to support you and take you on from where you currently are. So if you could, in the registration form, if you decide this is for you, give us some kind of idea of how much experience you already have. You will also need the commitment of your employer to commit the time to this. If we can, next slide, please, James.
Sorry. There we go.
Okay, so next steps to register then. We've recorded this session and we will be providing that to you all to think over and to repeat if you want to, and you'll also have the slides to look through. If you're interested to apply, as I said, please get agreement from your employer for the time required here. Registration deadline we're saying is the 12th of April, but it will start quite soon after that. And you can register. James has put the link in the chat. You could also use this QR code, and that will take you through to Microsoft Forms. Very short registration, a couple of minutes, just giving us a bit more detail about yourself, the institution you work for, and what experience you currently have. And with that, I think we can go to any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Will. So appreciate we've covered quite a lot of ground there, but I do hope that, as I said at the beginning, we're getting to a place now where you're a lot clearer on what's involved and whether this might be right for you. So we do have an opportunity now. If anyone's got any immediate questions, you should feel free to share with us, either just speak up or put a question in the chat. If something occurs to you afterwards that you wish you'd ask, then please do reach out to us on the training email that you all have, or just contact me or Will directly. But does anyone have any questions right now? Is everything crystal clear? Sounds like it is. Yep, that's good. Evgenia has given us a heart, so that's a good sign. At least you can hear us. I'll ask one last time, and then we can wrap up. Does anyone have any questions? Well, that's fantastic. We've done our job then. We've communicated, I hope, clearly what the program is and what the expectations are. So next steps, if you're interested, please do save that date in your diary, the 17th to the 19th of July in Frankfurt. Please do also sign up on the link, and that will be coming out. You've seen the QR code, the link's in the chat. I will also send it out when I send out the recording of this webinar. The sooner you can register, the better. That will help us plan accordingly. And then we will kick off with the 2 webinars, late April, early May, and there'll be some more activity just as we build towards them in terms of scheduling and planning. So if that's it, then I will thank you all very much indeed for your time today. Thank you for your attention. And please repeat the dates for the on-site workshop. That is the 17th to the 19th of July in Frankfurt, Germany. So those are the dates for that. The dates for the webinars yet to be scheduled. We'll be doing that very shortly. But if nobody else has any other questions or comments, then I shall draw us to a close. Thank you all very much indeed. Have a great day. Enjoy Easter when it comes, and we'll look forward to working with a lot of you as we get into the spring and summer. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.